You're now ready to go?
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to Policy and Regulatory. We have one apology from Councillor McAnally. Could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Thomson, Councillor Lynch, all in favour? Thanks again, carried. Confirmation of the status of agenda. Now we're going to do a bit of a move around here. We will be bringing the Chief Executive's business plan up to the first in the reports. The late paper on climate change will be at the end. We are receiving all reports with this, and we are giving speaking rights to the Chair of the Huntly Community Board, David White. I don't think there's any other chairs with us. So can I please have a mover for that? Councillor Church and Councillor Patterson, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest? I am taking that as a no. Confirmation of the minutes held on the 20th of July. Could I please have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Thomson, and a seconder, Councillor Eyre. All in favour? More hands?
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Could I ask just a question on page 8 in respect of the minutes?
Yes.
We still note that we have no museums as strategic assets in the Waikato District Council. May I just ask why we don't acknowledge Raglan Museum?
Where do you want me to start?
Okay. Is it a separate discussion on another occasion?
Yes, separate discussion.
Okay, right.
So that the minutes are correct as reflected. Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like me to address that?
If you wish, yes, thank you.
We don't own the Raglan Museum. They're not our assets. In the same way, the Waikato Coalfields Museum, they're not our assets either.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Okay, so neatly segueing to you, Mr. Iron, would you like to do your business plan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so this is the updated business plan for this financial year, as agreed with the subcommittee, as agreed with the committee, the Chief Executive's Performance Committee in June. Just to go through some things, Madam Chair, probably the things I wanted to just comment on, because I'll take the report as read.
Why is he in
Who is whispering?
Don't know. Okay, so in terms of just to cover things I wanted to talk a little bit about the recovery plan and the work we're doing around economic and community recovery. So economic stimulus packages. We've obviously had funding approved for the Raglan Wharf project, and we're working that through with the community. Te Awa Cycleway, and that is affecting and benefits all three councils, Waipa, Hamilton City and Waikato District Council. And then there is also the stimulus funding through the government's Three Waters Reform Program, which was signed off by the Waters Governance Board last week. And the MOU has been signed by His Worship the Mayor and myself, and that's been acknowledged by Department of Internal Affairs. So that is in, and we're now working on the actual funding or the projects that will fund. We have until the 30th of September to make that happen. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Hamilton to Auckland corridor work. So what we're trying to do there is to make sure that there is alignment between Waikato 2070, the Metro Spatial Plan, and also the detailed business case for the wastewater plants, both to the south of Hamilton and to the north of Hamilton. So for us to make a contribution to that project, we need to know that that is supportive of our development plans as evidenced in Waikato 2070. So we're ensuring there's alignment there. Madam Chair, just wanting to also talk a little bit about relationship with NZTA. So the relationship with NZTA, I think, is rebuilding. The partnership director for NZTA, both the Mayor and myself are working with him closely on a number of things. And on Friday morning, we had the opportunity to talk to Steve and his team, and they that was an opportunity for us, but an opportunity for them to find out more about council and understand more about some of our challenges. So we spent about half an hour. I thought it was very useful. And Madam Chair, those are really the things I wanted to comment on. Happy to take questions on anything else.
Are there any questions on this, Councillor Beck?
Yeah, Gavin, I'm just wondering if you're able to expand on your comment that there's benefits to all three councils for the Te Awa money. I haven't heard any detail at all there so far.
Okay, so to be honest, this is third hand. I've been told by Te Awa Trust that there are benefits to all three councils, because I know there was some suggestions that actually we weren't a beneficiary, but I understand that we are. I'm still trying to get the details of what that means and how that translates to hopefully some savings for us in terms of what we've already committed to the cycleway. Once I get that, I'll let councillors know. Councillor Beck.
Any other questions for the CEO? No, I think we're done. Thank you very much, Gavin.
Thank you.
Now, can I please just take everybody back, because in my haste to get the CEO to his next appointment, I have left out the actions register, which is on page 11. Are there any questions or comments on that? No. Okay, moving on, we are on page 14, which is the delegated delegated resource consent approvals, and this is for your information, but we have Wade here to answer any questions of a more of a general nature. Wade, do you have anything you want to say on this? Okay, Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is specific for Pocono, but I guess it's about schools. So I have actually sent an email in for clarity. Haven't had an answer yet, but it was done on the weekend. So just on page 16, the Ministry of Education is granted a consent for the Pocono school. But what I was asking about was, this is under the National Environmental Standard for Assessing and Managing Contaminants in Soils to Protect Human Health regulations. And because it's actually a school grounds, I was kind of wanted a bit more framework is around contaminants, human health, schools, children. So I wonder if there was anyone who could perhaps send some clarity around that, I guess, and just also understanding for any other work that's done on our schools in the district.
Good morning, Councillor Church. I can answer that if you like. The application is actually in Jason's area, Jason Wright's area. He's given me a little brief update this morning. It was for a small area of discrete contamination within the car park area. The application was actually to upgrade the car park area. That was the subject of the proposal. So when it doesn't meet certain standards under the NES, they have to go through a consent process. So that process was worked through. I haven't actually seen the conditions of consent for this one, unfortunately. However, normally where required, they'll have a remedial action plan and site management plan and those sort of conditions, requiring them to be brought up to a suitable standard for use, bearing in mind that the whole NES is about safeguarding human health. So yeah, it's an appropriate process to go through. Even though the site is designated, they still need to go through the NES process. It doesn't give them an exclusion from that, like with normal land use consents for the use itself. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this? Right, then we move on to item 6.2 on page 25, which is the applications determined by the licensing committee. Again, that is there for your information. And I assume there are no questions and nothing, Councillor Smith, that you want to comment on? No.
Yes, there is. Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. Just look on page 27, that last one, SRP Holdings, which was a hearing. An interesting situation under the Act. A tavern is a premises that predominantly sells alcohol. And I had a little suspicion about this one and looked at what was going on with the gambling. And without going into too much detail, at the hearing it was disclosed that the 9 machines in the premises were taking in $4.573 million in the last 12 months, ending 31 March. However, from that 4.5 million as a venue, they only get 36,000. So the alcohol sales actually just beat the 36,000, and the premises was being run at a loss and subsidised by 3 other premises that are owned by the group. But it was just interesting that whilst 4.5 million in takings from gambling, it was still deemed to be a tavern with only $47,000 worth of alcohol sales. So it's just for noting, but obviously when you think about alcohol and gambling, yeah, I reserve my judgment on that, but I just brought it to your attention. I think anything else I'll answer questions to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And there's no questions, so we will move on to item 6.3, which is the Plan Change 22. And this is really the background to the private plan change hearing in Huntly, which has now become operational. Are there any comments, queries, discussion on this? Good. If not, we then will move to 6.4, which is on page 31, which is the update on the policy and bylaw review program. And I think Sue,
Madam Chair, did you do the Plan Change 22 Build Smart?
I've just done that.
Sorry, I thought I was open.
So Sue, wherever you are on my screen.
Yes.
Oh, hiding in the middle. Okay, would you like to introduce us then?
Yes. So after the last meeting, discussed this with Councillor Sedgwick, and we agreed that it would probably be a really good idea to have a regular report to this committee, just giving us an update of where all the policy and bylaw changes were and what was coming up in the next 6 to 12 months, just so that people had a good eye forward, particularly for the community boards as well, who are often interested in putting in, being part of the consultation process. So just to give people a little bit more information on what's happening and when it's happening. So Stacey's put this report together. She's with us today. So I'll just let her go over any key information that she wants to, and be open to questions through Stacey. Thanks.
Thanks, Stacey.
Everyone. So Sue has covered it off quite nicely. The reason we are having this report is so that the committee can have a broader oversight of the upcoming work program for our policy and bylaw reviews. It's also a good opportunity in this forum for you to raise any queries or concerns you have regarding timing issues, or if you want to have any particular bylaw or policy prioritised. With that, I would just mention that since March, we have made progress on our alcohol control bylaw. I won't go into that too much. I believe that is the next report on the agenda. But we are also progressing our keeping of animals bylaw and our livestock movement bylaw. We hope to have those available for public consultation in the next 6 months or so. as well as our significance and engagement policy, which is currently being consulted on. So those are the 4 items we are actively working on as part of this review program at the moment. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Stacey. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. So, Stace, you're scoping the petitions policy. So
Yes.
if you're going to change anything on that, you'll come back to us, won't you, so we can make comment?
Absolutely. I believe the intention with the petitions policy at this stage is that as part of that review, there may be some consideration that the policy become more akin to guidelines, which is something that is practiced in central government.
Okay, I think it's quite, I think the instructions are quite confusing and people just don't understand. I think we need a little bit more advertising around it since we're getting more petitions.
Absolutely. And that is definitely something we will come to the council for a good steer on.
Thank you. Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 things. Firstly, the charters for the Pōkeno Community Committee in Tamahiri are not on page 38 with Meri Te Kauwhata. So I just wondered whether, because I know that the Pōkeno one has been an update of their charter at their last election. So that was just clarifying that.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't aware that that should have been on this register. What you see here is currently everything we have. So if that is an omission, we can go about correcting it and including it in the register.
Yeah, I think it is good because I can't speak for Councillor Beck's area, but I do know that Pōkeno Community Committee does have a charter and is an authorised committee of council. So just something to look into. And the other one I have is, other than the concern about the time frame of some of these, is the bylaws that have actually been reviewed and are coming up for review again fairly soon in the next couple of years, looking at trying to do the time frame of the ones that we've got to try and catch up on, plus the ones we're going to try and keep current. I kind of have a concern that we're going to have a capacity issue ongoing for quite a few years, and some of the ones we've just done may also end up being, although they're current now, may also end up coming late. So I'm just wanting some understanding of really the overall time frame of some of those ones as well.
Well noted, Councillor. There is significant consideration that we as staff are putting into the prioritisation of our bylaws. You'll see that we have prioritised at the moment our alcohol control bylaw and our livestock movement bylaw because they have expired and lapsed and we need to make them again. So they're our priorities. In terms of the ongoing review program, we are conscious that in terms of resourcing, we do need to make sure we have availability across a number of teams. So that is the corporate planning team as the project managers of the review program, as well as our subject matter experts and our legal teams and our comms teams. So our prioritisation is flexible in that regard, but we do intend with best practice to review our bylaws as much as we possibly can before they expire.
Yeah, because I just know that a lot of the ones in green are coming up for review in 2021. So I think it's good that, what's happening, and it's great to have this report. But the catch up plus the ones that are all due for 2021, even if you've got 2 years, it just, I'm just seeing a lot of backlog and concerns going forward.
And that's why we've started putting this out so that you can see what exactly we're working to. Councillor Thomson, then Smith, then Eyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stacey. I just had a question about the ones that we're looking at revoking, for example, the temporary road closures and events. When we revoke or make a recommendation to revoke, does that mean that we won't have a policy on that? What does that mean?
When we revoke the policy, staff go through a process of ensuring that everything included in that policy can be dealt with either in another policy, another strategy, another bylaw, so that the activities in there are still appropriately controlled in another area. If in some cases the policies are considered no longer needed, we will just revoke them. But everything that is in the three that are noted to be revoked, my understanding is they can be controlled using a policy that is not the current one.
Does that answer your question? Okay, Councillor Smith.
Well, I had that point as well. So Stacey, when you come to the next meeting looking to revoke that, I certainly would like to have more information on it, because that's one of the most fraught areas of the business that we get with the roading side of things, with rallies and the like. So some detail there, please. So if I can then go back to what my original point was, I see on policies you are looking to review the livestock movement policy at the same time as the bylaw, but there's an associated one, the stock underpass policy, that is also in the same vein, and I would think we should link that to that bit of work as well, and then we can get rid of all three at the same time.
Yep, that would be very appropriate to include as part of the bylaw review.
Thank you.
Makes sense. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Are there any other questions? Councillor Eyre, yours has been answered, I believe. No other questions? Oh, sorry, you are. Yes, Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, thank you. On page 35, 36, I do also note you've got the rate in rural community areas policy and your lease in rural halls. I wonder if those policies, in light of the fact that there's actually a district-wide hall boundary review being undertaken by Geordie, this sort of feeds into that, doesn't it?
It may have some impact, Councillor. I don't have a great deal of knowledge in those specific policies, but I can certainly look into those and have that discussion with Geordie if she is going through a review of the rating catchments for halls at the moment.
It just occurs to me that she's obtaining a lot of information that would be really relevant to both of those policies, and it seems silly to lose that information now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we can. I can connect those in with Geordie.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
That point that's just been raised, I'm not aware of that happening at all. So how is that actually being done? And if no one can answer it, can we have some information supplied to us? I'd be very surprised to see any changes in some areas. But anyway, so can we have some more information on it, please?
Thank you. And Councillor Wallerton?
Yeah, it's probably just clarification for myself. So on page 36, there's a whole lot of pink that all these policies have expired or the next review date a long time ago. Does that mean that they're still current? We just haven't done anything about it. We should have looked at it, but we haven't. If it's a big deal, we'll go back and look at it.
Correct, Councillor. While the policies, and there are a number of them that need to be reviewed, are past their review by date, they are still effective until they are revoked.
But we are, as we've said before, very aware that some of these are quite elderly, and that is the reason for bringing them forward, so that you're all very clear on where we're up to with them. Are there any further questions on this? Mayor Allan?
Yeah, just take myself off mute. Just further back to that question that Councillor Eyre raised and then Smith followed up on. Geordie's actually not doing a review of the halls. What she's done is she's gone to all the halls and asked them to feed back information on future requirements going forward. So it's not a review as we would know a review been underway, to my knowledge anyway. So it's around going back on an annual thing, because we are leading up to the LTP. What are their requirements going forward, and what do they want to see in relation to that? That's my understanding of it anyway.
Yeah, Councillor Smith.
So Alan, Mr. Mayor, are the Whare community has consulted and still has to come back and have a formal consultation on this, but there's a whole rating area planned, which there was an initial indicator that it would be supported. So obviously we'll have to take that forward to the LTP. So whoever's, we'll have to capture that somewhere.
Yes. So just for your knowledge, that's exactly the sort of thing she's trying to collate at the moment around what are their requirements going forward in relation to increased rates and stuff like that. So when we talk about reviews, a review is an upheaval as we've had in the past, and that's not what this is about. It's around looking at the future requirements for them to actually being able to administer and financially run their halls at least at a profit instead of a loss.
But can I ask just on that, Madam Chair? So we've talked in the past about most halls not actually rating sufficiently to do maintenance and the likes, where there's about 4 halls that do, and they're well maintained. So are we actually steering them in a direction in this program, please?
Well, look, I'll give you my view on that, and I actually talked about this at a joint halls meeting last week at Te Akau, and part of the problem is we do have a number of halls that are not taking sufficient money from their targeted rates to maintain the building in the standard which it should be at least maintained to keep it for use. And I've always advocated if they can't come to the decision themselves, maybe we need to take that and actually do it based off feedback from our staff as to the standard, what's required to bring it up to spec. Because you've got to realise most of these halls actually belong to us, and we've asked them to administer it on our behalf. So they actually are our asset base. So if they can't do it, we need to do it. And if staff are actually having to be engaged to do more and more of this, we need to fund it some way. So I beg to think those councils that have still got a targeted rate at under $30 a hall these days, I just think you're totally unrealistic unless you've got a colossal rating area, which I don't think too many of them have. So so that's the sort of thing we need to seriously look at. And I'd probably call on all the councillors to actually look at the halls in their wards as to what needs more support, especially more financial support.
Thank you, Councillor Church.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, because that's yes, not a full review. Geordie's doing a lot of work in the North Waikato on the 3 halls, but particularly the Kariatahi one, which, as we know, for the last 10 years has only had a third of its targeted rate area because of the amalgamation. So yeah, it's really on specific halls that have been identified as having issues. I guess that's why Councillor Smith, you had some work with Whara. So that's my understanding of it, and also like she's also doing work with our Wangaratta Hall, which is between Tuakau and Pokeno for a similar reason.
Yeah, so just to clarify that, she is, that's why I was out at Te Akau with Councillor Eyre the other night, was to look at the boundaries between Nike and Te Akau, but also understand up in the north the agreement on the realignment of the boundaries for what is it, Otau and Ark, I think, and there's a bit of shifting of boundaries and agreement between them, which is far more amicable instead of going to loggerheads. So it's all that tweaking around the edges to make them all sustainable going forward in the future.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on this? I think we're all good. Thank you very much, Stacey. Right. So we're now on to item 6.5, which is page 39, which is the approval for consultation of the alcohol control bylaw. And we have Tony to introduce this. Thank you.
Good morning, all, and thank you for that. Look, just before, 2 things just to start off with. I'd like to take the documentation as being read, please. I'd also just like to correct an error that we have on the copy that was uplifted for your consideration on page 4 of the proposed document. That's section 6.3. It talks about a ban from 7 till 7. That should actually be 9 till 9, as we have talked about in the covering report. So I apologise for that. So just having taken that document as being read, there is just 3 points I'd like to just bring to the fore, because they are key points of this. Firstly, just to share that this proposed bylaw that we're recommending for consultation supersedes the expired Waikato District and Franklin District's liquor control bylaws. I'd also just point out again that what we've presented is based on feedback from workshops and evidence from the police. And the evidence in this situation is quite important because, as you're aware of having read the documentation, to put in a control area requires a significant amount, that a high level of crime or disorder caused or made worse by alcohol consumption is evident. And also that the council feels that this proposed bylaw is a reasonable limitation of people's rights and freedoms. So those are key points that go through the whole documentation. The final thing I'd just like to say is that we've tried to propose what we see as a useful bylaw, but really it's the consultation that we're looking forward to getting the community's feedback on timings, on areas, on evidence. And I think that feedback will add real value to the final bylaw, whatever that looks like. So look, those are just 2 or 3 key points I wanted to put forward. But take it that the documentation has been read and that the recommendations are as were put forward.
Okay, so I'll open this up for discussion. Councillor Eyre and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I am strongly in support for this going out to consultation. I mean, you may be aware that this alcohol places bylaw across the country has been subject to a number of judicial reviews, so it's a real need to actually get this right. So I'm more than happy to move option 3.
Thank you. We'll just hold that in abeyance at the moment. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. On page 42, under seasonal alcohol control areas, the 3rd paragraph talks about the previous district council prohibited alcohol consumption in public places over the entire Raglan ward. Feedback from elected members was that this was too restrictive. And this is what concerns me. However, due to the recommendation from the police to reinstate the whole ward, staff are proposing to the entire prohibition remain. Well, I thought we gave a clear direction that we thought that was too restrictive. So why is it remaining? And I don't think it is right that it remain when, as a whole, we said it was too restrictive. I appreciate without the, and Councillor has spoken of the challenges, without evidence, these bylaws cannot get past go. So the police have shown evidence, but the reality for me is reading the evidence, Narrawaki and Huntly are way ahead of Raglan. So I'm just not sure that I can support the restrictive whole of ward for Raglan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll try to answer that question. So we did have that feedback at the workshop that the whole Raglan ward was too restrictive. So then we sought more feedback from the police on where to draw the line, because yeah, it was just hard trying to figure out, so where do we include this beach, this road? And I'm not expert on the Raglan area, so I really needed that information from the police, and they weren't able to provide that. And because the evidence that they had provided, both the Waikato report and the Raglan evidence, both supported the wider Raglan ban area, without them adjusting their evidence or their support, I didn't feel that it was okay for me to just willy-nilly reduce the area to what I thought. So what we discussed was that we go back out to the community and the police, and this is a good opportunity for the police and perhaps the community board to work together and draw the lines and show evidence, or with supporting evidence to show which areas it should be reduced to.
Well, Madam Chair, I appreciate your comments, but it's like Councillor has referred to about the challenges. Now, the police, you've just said, don't have evidence to support the whole of the Raglan ward. This is a wish and a prayer on their part, and I'm using my inside information from when they appear before me on alcohol licensing applications, and Raglan is the one that's had the most issues in this area. But it's all centered around the town and some of the beaches. It doesn't affect the rural areas. And so I do not think that we can justify, and we will get it tossed out in this area, if we try and impose something that there is no evidence for. So if we're going to go out and hope that someone finds some evidence, it should be in the police records now. And if they cannot say, because of these incidents in the rural area, it should be. It isn't there. And so it's a wing and a prayer and a hope. And it just does not justify it, I'm sorry, that we go out there. This is you talk about a bylaw that restricts people's freedoms, but you cannot restrict freedoms under the Bill of Rights unless there's a justification, and unless the police can provide that, you just can't do it, I'm sorry.
If I just could respond to that, we could of course take that particular ban area out of the proposed bylaw, going to consultation, and then see what comes back from consultation. We could remove it from the consultation process at the stage.
I'd like to hear what my colleagues say. Thanks.
I think that could be wise, because it still opens it up again if anybody has evidence that they particularly feel strongly about, and that would be up to the ward council also to be talking to people. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm concerned about Tuakau going 9 till 9. The police recommendation is 7 to 7, and I thought the discussion was held, maybe we don't go district wide. Maybe there is a need for certain areas to have certain times.
Thank you, Tony.
Yes, if I could just respond to that. Yes, there was quite a bit of discussion at the last workshop. What we had come away with was an understanding that we would try and put forward a time that was consistent across the whole area, so it was workable for police, I guess you could say. And that was really, so it was, as you say, 7 to 7 in the Franklin area and 10 till 10 in the Waikato district area. And so the discussion from members, I believe, was around 9 or 9:30, and we felt that 9 was appropriate as a single figure across the whole area, because the discussion I thought was erring on the side of it would be difficult to, or what I took from the discussion, it would be difficult to have a number of different times from across the region. And in fact, I think it probably would be, if we're asking, this is a tool for police to use who may use this at their discretion. I think to have different times may be challenging for them.
Thank you. I have Kirsty Ridling and then Councillor Church, then Councillor Lynch.
Good morning, everybody. Apologies, I had to unmute myself. I just wanted to say quickly, look, what I think needs to be understood is the document that's going to consultation is not the final document. Any changes can be made once consultation is undertaken. I accept your point, Councillor Smith, in terms of requiring the evidence, but I think the point that Jodie was trying to make was that it's difficult for staff to simply draw in lines of where they think it might be appropriate for the ban to start or finish. And I think what we were trying to do with having sort of just an overall ban is to give, it's almost started as a discussion point for the public, for the police, and for all the other stakeholders to come in and say, okay, we don't agree with this, or we think that, you know, certain areas would be more appropriate. And as elected members, councillors are obviously the people who have to ultimately adopt the document, so you ultimately have to agree with the contents of it. By no means is the proposed areas going to be what is necessarily in the final document. It's just sort of a starter for 10 in terms of literally for a consultation process. This is what we've proposed. It may or may not eventuate, if that makes sense.
Thank you. With Councillor Church, then Lynch, then Thomson, then Beck. Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Church. You're doing a fine job there. It's very, it's not easy. I have 3 points. Just like to follow on from Councillor Henderson, and having had extensive discussions, obviously, with the workshop as well as with staff to understand some of the issues and map inaccuracies with the staff. So thank you for doing this attempt here. But I am just a couple of things that you may not be aware of in terms of staff and of this draft that's going out. Counties Manukau Police is the old Franklin Police border. The evidence that you actually have states very categorically from Counties Manukau on our reserves that 7 to 7 works and that it has been in place. So in terms of you wanting direct evidence, it's very clear. And when we say police, we can't say Waikato Police because Waikato Police do not do the Counties Manukau area. So although we might want to put one carte blanche discussion in there, you have actual evidence from the police by reserve in your letters stating that those reserves in the North Waikato, Franklin area, by the police need to be 7 to 7. So I would ask that that's actually taken into consideration. I know that Councillor Henderson and myself both agree on this, and it'll be interesting to hear from Councillor Eyre as an example because she's on the Onewhia Community Board, but you're actually looking for evidence. So I really reiterate before this goes out, and really you're going to unpack something that is actually working really well in the North Waikato just because you want consistency. Number 2, when you're talking about evidence and consistency, because we've had those discussions around how big the maps are and what the actual town centres are of both Tuakau and Pokeno as really fast growing towns, and you wanted evidence, I understand that, but I see no evidence whatsoever for you putting in Taupiri. Not once have I seen Taupiri on the letters from the police, and yet you've got added Taupiri and areas of that I can't even see that's even discussed in terms of the evidence of the map. When I see, so I'm just querying that on one thing where the Counties Manukau Police say, please put it 7 to 7, it's working fine, that's what we need, and to put Elders Road in as a significant area, and yet these are not identified, and yet there's quite carte blanche extension or continuation of the streets of both Huntly and Ngaruawahia, and yet when you look at the maps and the extensiveness in those towns, the map extensions that you've proposed are very limited within the Tuakau Pokeno area. Third point, having had discussions around the maps, the Kariatahi map again is still incorrect because the Kariatahi Beach car park, including the surf club and north, is Auckland City Council. So they may or may not have an alcohol free area on that part of the map, but we probably on our policy proposed just not to confuse the border people, perhaps just stick to our side of the border on that map. I thought I'd sent you a screenshot of that. And I'd appreciate a bit of feedback about how it seems a bit we're not consistent about which evidence we take and which understanding we do. Because, when I look at some of the maps like for Ngaruawahia or Raglan, and I take what Councillor Smith says around Raglan, and I'd like to listen to what Councillor Thomson says about that. When I look at those Huntly, Ngaruawahia and Raglan and the extent of areas that we're not allowed to have alcohol at all, and then I look at the North Waikato towns, there seems to be quite heavy-handed in some areas and not very heavy-handed in others. Even Pokeno doesn't even have its own community hall, as an example, on Market Street covered, and yet I'm pretty sure that all the other halls do because these are sensitive areas and areas where there's a lot of alcohol potentially. So just a bit more feedback about the logic and also the evidence that you've got from the police would be appreciated.
Yeah, okay. I'll talk about the question about Taupiri. I had that concern as well, and I contacted David Hall, who wrote the report, and he advised me that Taupiri was included in Ngaruawahia. If you look, so what the areas that we drew for both ex-Franklin and Waikato were taken from the previous bylaws that were in place. And generally speaking, and I know definitely for the Waikato area that, so Ngaruawahia is quite extensive because it covers licensed premises. So the bands often go from sport club to sport club just with licenses, so that's why the Ngārawahi area is quite extensive. I can't really answer the ex-Franklin areas, as we literally took what was in the previous bylaw and the letter from police just to show that those banned areas obviously are working. We did introduce Pōkeno, obviously it's newly developed, and the police asked for that. Pōkeno have one, and we really could only draw the line on, I asked our environmental health team how many licensed premises or any premises with licenses were, and so that's the start for 10, just like what Kirsty said. Yeah, like just again reiterating that whatever goes out is obviously a draft, and everything is, you know, susceptible to change or to feedback or to evidence from the communities and police.
Just picking up on the point about boundaries with Auckland, I did actually ask our GIS person to double check what they could represent and to check the areas of Auckland, and acknowledge that it was an issue that was raised at our last workshop. And I was assured that what we had in the maps was what they could put together. But I'll go back and have another look at that. But I was told that that is the best that they can outline in terms of their mesh blocks.
I think thank you, Tony. I think what we're hearing here as well is this is a draft to go out to consultation. We're looking for people to come back with their opinions and with their evidence to a hearing, and we do have a hearing date. Councillor Lynch. Right, you're not. Councillor Thomson then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really talking to the point that Councillor Smith brought up, particularly around the entire area of the Raglan ward. I think that it would be like a red rag to a bull actually going out with that, and we'll get a lot of kickback from the community around proposing that. I know it's going out there to seek the feedback of community and you know, having the input of community boards and so on. But there isn't any data or evidence to support that that be in place for the entire ward, which makes it really tricky. I would prefer that that map wasn't in there when we go out to consult, and perhaps put it in a way where we're working with the local ward councillor and the community board to ask where are the areas that perhaps need that liquor ban during that time. And it would be more in those public places like Waireanga, Bridal Veil Falls, Ruapuki Beach, that type of area. So I personally would prefer it not to, that whole ward map not to be included in the consultation, because I think, like I said, we'll get a lot of kickback from the community rather than positive, proactive input. We'll just get people going, oh, here goes council again. And yeah, and respond in a way that we probably don't want them to. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beck.
Yes, thank you. Just 2 points, and I'm sorry I missed the first of the 2 workshops. I did make the second one, but not the first, so this may have been covered. But is there, I thought I saw somewhere that there is a sort of a blanket statement on all reserves, and I just struggled to find it in the draft that's released just now. Can you help me with that?
Tony, can you find that? I know I share your concerns. I looked several times and found what I needed.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, and I'm just looking for the reference as well. Reserve, council parks, reserves. I don't think it mentions domains.
No, we had that conversation.
Oh, there we are. Council controlled parks, reserves, esplanades.
It's under the timed alcohol control areas on page 42, Councillor Beck.
6.3.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So it's only the ones that are specifically mentioned, is it?
The ones that are specifically mentioned were proposed for a 24/7 ban.
Right, and if not mentioned, then there is no provision at all. So in other words, a sports field in Ngarawahia, unless covered by the map, or in Tamaheri or in Port Waikato or whatever, would not normally be covered because it's not covered in a map or in this named in this clause. Is that correct?
It would be covered from what we're proposing is the 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. It would be covered under that, certainly.
So that's on the bottom of page 42.
6.3
so
is the
council controlled parks, reserves and esplanades not subject to the above. So basically that's sort of a blanket for everywhere else.
That's
yes?
Correct.
Yep. And does that also pick up, and I saw it was covered in a different clause, car parks? So the car park next to a reserve, is that also covered by that 9 to 9? Because it's in a different clause.
I believe, and I've just struck.
Under the legislation.
Thanks, Joe. I just can't find, I can't verbatim respond to you other than generally, yes, it is associated car parks.
I know the amendments to the legislation did say even if it is a private car park, if it is next to a public reserve and the public have use and access to it, it can be covered as a public place. Including
if it's fee paying as well.
Right. Okay, and thank you. My second question is, if there's an area that's not contemplated in our proposal, but that the community wishes to feed back on, and you are very much treating this as a draft, I guess, what evidence would that community need to provide with a submission? So I understand the hurdle is a bit higher than normally where you might just say, here's my opinion. In this instance, we are looking for evidence, are we not? And therefore, what guidance would we give to community boards and other individual members of the public in order for their submission to carry more weight?
Absolutely, you're correct. The threshold is high, and I just read here, a high level of crime or disorder caused by or made worse by alcohol consumption is evident to consider a control ban area. So it is quite high. We'll try and articulate that as best we could for people. I think it's the area that made worse by alcohol consumption that we might get the most feedback on, because police are really the only ones that have numbers of high crime. But I think the public would certainly have a comment on the area of aspect that an area may be made worse by alcohol consumption. And I think that's a little bit more broader.
But the guidance generally would be to not just express an opinion, but to actually try and gather some additional information. Would you even encourage community committees, for example, to seek an opinion from police, or is that something that council does in response to a submission?
That could well be done. I think that type of engagement would really inform this this consultation process. And you're right. Sorry, I might have misread your question or statement. There would be evidence required. I guess it might be a member of the public saying, yes, I have seen a fight on the corner of my street, people drinking and fighting on 5 occasions or whatever, but some sort of, just rather than, oh, look, I think it would be a nice idea. Evidence is absolutely critical. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before I go to Councillor Smith, Ms. Ridling, do you want to please comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In relation to Councillor Thomson's suggestion that we remove the map, that's we're more than capable of doing that. The issue I have is that if we don't have a map, often people kind of don't know where to start. So I wonder if it's appropriate to rather have it, and this is me just sort of thinking out loud, rather than have it as a district-wide. I mean, do we want to put in something like a map of the township, for example? Just something to sort of, I guess, give people an idea about where we're proposing to have the ban area, rather than, and we, in all honesty, we considered this right at the start. Do we put in any maps? Do we leave them blank and allow, sort of the public to work out where they want it? And we came to the conclusion that it's often easier for the public to be able to look at something and say, I think that area is good, but I don't think that area is. And I agree with Councillor Thomson and Councillor Smith. ward-wide, it came out wrong, a ward-wide ban probably wouldn't be taken very well, but I think it would be helpful to have something there for the community to at least consider. In terms of Councillor Beck, as to the evidence, I'd just reiterate what Tony said. The community is invited, and that's why we're inviting them to say to us, you know, I'm aware of every Saturday night there is fighting, or every weekend we, you know, have people drinking in the park and it becomes loud. Not necessarily that they've called the police, but they're aware of it. That is still evidence. We don't just have to say that the police are the only people who can provide the evidence. The community themselves can also provide the evidence, and that's why we're going out to this consultation. So I think the idea of the community boards working with the police, but I think also inviting members of the public to come and say, look, you know, this is my evidence, is very helpful, and that's the point of this consultation.
Madam Chair, can I speak, please? Before Councillor Smith has a second bite of the cherry, can I have my first one?
You can have your first bite.
Considering I put my hand up at the beginning, but obviously you didn't see me. So it's been interesting listening to this, and I every time this comes around, I compare it with what I know happens up in the Coromandel, and we all know that there's vast more stringent liquor licensing areas up there than what there is in the Waikato, and for good reason if you know the history up there. So my first thing is I just want to go back to some of the comments have been made that Tony's made, and Kirsty's also made a bit of comments around police reporting. Now, having a family member that's a frontline officer in relation to dealing with this sort of thing, a lot of the time they not gather the evidence. So it's there all the time, they don't capture it though. And it's always been an age-old problem for us in this area that not all evidence associated with crime and alcohol and drugs is not necessarily captured by frontline officers and fed back through the system. So it's not collated, which makes it harder for the team to actually gather that information. So the next thing is my mind, and look, and I think a ward-wide one, unless your ward is as tiny as Tamaheri, I would suggest is not really tenable either. But what I would suggest we need to seriously consider, as has happened in the Coromandel, is it's done based on every community, based on its urban limits. Now, I struggle when I look at these maps and I see streets that are named. The only reason those streets are named is because there's probably an alcohol outlet on it. But the crime doesn't necessarily always happen around there. It happens in the back streets. It happens in every other street in town. And the police are powerless to act unless we give them the power. Now, we're the ones through this policy, bylaw, that gives them the power to act. So when I look at Raglan, I'm looking at it at the moment, it's a CBD map, but that's only the places the alcohol is sold. I would suggest that any issues associated with alcohol is in that area that's all white and beyond. So I'm struggling to understand why we don't take the more common approach as TCDC have done up there for decades and actually create it around the urban limits of every community. And this is where I think we should be looking. And look, and there may not be sufficient evidence, but I'll tell you what, I think your community will get in behind you on this if you actually do it that way, whether the evidence is there or not. So that's the challenge I put to the team, is to ask questions. Why aren't we? I look at all the other maps and I look at Huntley, and I know why we put the likes of Harris Street, but then I see Parry Street and Pucky Street and all those streets, Semple Street, Webb Street, where I know probably 4 nights of the week there's nothing but crime. So why aren't we including those? This is my problem. If we had it based around urban limits and capture all, you give the power to the police to act on your behalf as community leaders. And this is where we should be going. I think this just picking streets like this is old-fashioned and well out of date.
Right.
Now I'd like to hear from Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith, yes.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Mayor, you and I and possibly Rob, if he was here, were the only ones there at the time, I think in 2009, when this came up and it became a fiasco. And quite frankly, the police were brought in, they gave the evidence, and with the greatest respect to staff, tried their damnedest to provide for what the police were asking for. And it came before us, it got to a committee meeting and it blew up in our face. We were over the Waikato Times, and then a day or two later we were in for St. Peter Harris, the then mayor, was sitting in the councillors' lounge, and there was a couple of other councillors there, and I came in, I think I was about number 4, and they were talking about the bylaw and what did we really want. And over a period of quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, most of the rest of the council came in and we sat down and had a very informal discussion about the whole issue. And essentially then Peter Harris wrote on a piece of paper what we thought the bylaw should look like and asked the chief executive to go away and have it typed up. And really that was how it was done, and it was quite effective. What I'm seeing here now is an absolute repeat of that process. The staff have gone in good faith to the police and are trying their damnedest to provide something for the police. Let's worry about what we want to provide for the community. And I think you've just touched on it, Mr. Mayor, is that I'm really surprised that our legal counsel is promoting something or supporting earlier on, perhaps change the position in the last comment she made, but we can't do something that's ultra vires, contrary to law. We have to base this on evidence. The police, and particularly with the Raglan ward, have not been able to provide that evidence, and therefore we cannot, in law, go out and put in front of the community a map based on something that's a wish rather than evidence-based. So I'm of the view that having got to where we've got to, that this forum is not actually the best place to resolve this. You may be looking for it. We're in there tomorrow, I believe, at Council for the Health and Safety. It may be a good time straight after that, because the workshop, I understand has been cancelled. So there is some time there that we could finish this off in looking at the maps, actually debating, have some argy-bargy around it, which is pretty much what happened in that council committee room, the lounge, those, 11 years ago. So not necessarily wanting to repeat exactly what we did, but the reality is, for me, this needs some more discussion, and we're not going to end it today. And if we sign this one off, it's a bad decision to go out for consultation. We need to act. And there's a rush to get this through for Christmas, and the reality is that's okay, but there's no good putting in bad legislation just because you're trying to get something in for the police. We need to do this right, and if we can't justify it, we're acting unlawfully, in my view. Thank you.
I just signed something off here. So for the new councillors, so you actually completely understand, we are only talking about public spaces, which are roads, reserves and things like that. So we can't impose this on private property. Absolutely. So if you took a whole town, all we're talking about is within the road reserve, playgrounds, sporting grounds and facilities like that. So it doesn't cover across private property. And that's exactly how it works. You can stand inside your gate in all the Coromandel towns and have a beer and talk to the police, but the minute you step outside your gate onto the footpath, then you are in breach of the bylaw.
Sorry, Sue, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I do have a bit of a concern that if we got together again tomorrow, not yesterday, that it's going to be very hard. I've been just sitting here listening to everybody, and there's a broad range of viewpoints, okay? And some of them are very localized viewpoints, and others are like Mayor Allan looking at whole urban limits. So I think one of the things we've got to decide is whether we want a bylaw that applies to the whole district, or whether we want one that applies to our individual, like more specifically to individual townships, which is a very hard one to manage. So, and also Councillor Smith's point, if we will be absolutely struggling to get this in place before Christmas, given the timeline that we've got. But I totally agree that we don't want sub-optimal legislation going out there either. So I'm wondering whether we could land on some high-level, more general things that we agree on, that we go out as a starting point. I think Kirsty and the team's point around this is a starting point for public submission. Now, we are really keen, and hopefully you are as well, that this is actually quite an actively participated bylaw in our community. We were really hoping for really strong buy-in to get the community boards involved and the community. And so a lot of this evidence will come out at that time. Now, quite happy to go with another meeting tomorrow, but I am just concerned that it's probably important that we come out with some consistent high-level generic approaches across our district, unless there's some really, really specific issues that we're dealing with.
Madam Chair, can I speak to that for Sue's sake? Look, I actually agree with you, Sue. We need to sign this off in some form today. Everybody needs to remember this is only a consultation document. So a whole raft of stuff will come out. The hard part will come when you do your deliberations based on the evidence and support that comes back. This is actually throwing something out to start discussion. I suppose the important thing is to make sure that there are options within the document that allow that to actually happen, or if people bring forward their own ideas. So I think we need to sign this off today so we can start the process, because I am probably fairly certain that this will look totally different when we actually do come out of the deliberations and finalise it, as it always does. And I go to the point around the ward-wide approach. Well, we all, I'm basically hearing the decision in the room here now around a number of us not supporting that approach. But it doesn't matter. You can throw it out there and see what the feedback comes, and we can amend it based on what we see coming in. So yeah, I would happy to move that we actually go forward with this and start that process. Because if we don't start it now, the trouble is if we leave it and try and have around the table tomorrow at some stage, you miss the window in relation to getting it out in time to actually do this pre-Christmas.
Kirsty, would you like to make a comment, please?
I've just replied to the chat, and I've effectively said, look, I've a couple of comments. So the evidence, and I use that term loosely, is there's no limit as to where the evidence can come from, and that's why we send this out to public consultation. The only requirement is that council is satisfied as to the evidence that is put before them. Now, one of the reasons why we left it quite broad is to invite, as Sue rightly pointed out, we want this to be quite a proactive or a collaborative piece of legislation with the community, and leaving things broad, it's the devil if you do and the devil if you don't. Sometimes if you leave it broad, you invite more interaction. Sometimes you invite more opposition. But what we were trying to do is invite evidence from the community, which council can accept, as to what they believe are the appropriate areas for the bans to be in place. And I think particularly about Raglan, where we're looking at, an area wide. I've just replied to Councillor Thomson and said, look, the maps can be whatever we want them to be. There's no hard and fast rule. It's what suits our community best. And like I say, when we first started, we actually thought about having no maps and simply sending the bylaw out blank, effectively, inviting the community to tell us what, or the community and the stakeholders, including the police, to tell us where they thought the bylaw should be. The maps, as we've got them now, are really only a guide. Like I've said earlier, they're certainly not anything that is hard and fast and is going to stay there. In terms of Councillor Smith, he is correct. We do require that evidence, but the evidence is part of the reason why we're doing this consultation, is to gather that evidence, to have those hearings, to listen from the community. Like I say, the evidence isn't just limited to the police. It can be from any other stakeholder. So long as it's not just an opinion, as Tony said, it's not that would be nice. It has to be, I am aware of there being these issues relating to alcohol. From our perspective, I know from timing, it is very tight to get this out to comply with the requirements of Section 83, as to we have to have a minimum of a month's public consultation. We then have to allow for hearings. I think we can pretty much ascertain that we will get hearings for this one because it is very contentious. And so, I mean, my view would be, look, we can make whatever changes we want to the maps. I just think we would prefer it to be able to stick with the timetable that we've got.
Sue, did you have a comment that you wanted to make? And then I have Councillor Thomson, Councillor Eyre and Mr White.
My suggestion would be that we do go out with this to public consultation, but the one that has obviously had quite a collaborative resonating response to is the Raglan area one. So potentially that is a map that we might just do the urban limits, or we can have a chat and decide, what's the appropriate thing, and make sure that it's very clear that this is just a guide. It's not in any way. It might even be that we do ... lines on the map as opposed to solid borders, so that there's an indication that it is just a starter for 10, as Jodie, I think she used those words. So that would be my way of moving this forward.
Thank you. So Councillor Eyre, did you have a question?
Yeah. No, just a comment. Thank you. Can I just ensure that that this consultation, in order to be really robust, actually comms goes out to also our hall committees? Obviously, Te Akau Hall is impacted. A lot of their socialising is in Raglan, and they're obviously not under the community board. So we need to cast the net as wide as we possibly can.
Okay. Thank you. Mr White?
I agree with that, and my comment would be if we could include some examples of what evidence would be appropriate, so we get people's minds thinking along those lines. So for example, two things that jump out at me is broken glass on footpaths, which is a real hassle and hazard in Huntly because people are drinking out in the public space and then throwing the bottles on the ground, causing hazards for kids, etc. But also things like youth wandering around with golf clubs and baseball bats, or drinking while they're doing that. Those kind of things wasn't obvious to me at the start of the conversation that would be worthwhile evidence. So it would be good in the communication to outline the various possible evidence collection things.
Thank you. Final two. Councillor Patterson, did you have a question? And Councillor Gibb.
Yeah, thank you. Just going back, like I'm happy with what's in there, but just going back to Mary Ellen's comments about urban limits, like if I just thinking about Ngārawahi and Taupiri communities, that would be more of an ideal fit with some of the issues we've had out here in probably the last 6 months or so. So if we consulted on those specific maps that are there now, and obviously with consultation feedback to come in, could we then turn around and go to an urban limits if we haven't consulted on that wide?
You could if it was actually raised as part of a submission.
Right.
So that's why sorry, Madam Chair, but that's why I'm saying is if Tony and the team put it in as one of the options that could be considered, it's actually it's a backstop for us, and that's what I'm asking them to do as part of signing this off, is to actually to do exactly that, and it gives us a back door to go back and readdress it based on feedback.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Kirsty, can you just confirm that we can make significant changes based on community evidence? If we haven't consulted on the extent of the changes potential.
So the requirement in terms of consultation is really just that we put the document out there, we invite public feedback. We've got, if you look at the bylaw, we propose the actual bylaw itself, we indicate, that there's going to be 2 possibly sort of 3 areas. We'll have specific areas, we'll have public places. I guess it depends on what we're talking in terms of extensive changes. I don't think that an urban limit as opposed to specific streets would necessarily be an extensive change. My understanding, and I'm just going to flick down to for example, the Ngaruawahia map. I'm just having a look at them now. Oh, that's quite that's a fair change. My recommendation would be, if we're going to propose, for example, in the Ngaruawahia, one is to possibly amend that so that it is the urban limit rather than those streets.
Amend though, so would another option be to put in urban limit as an option, so people not draw them in on the maps, but just say on each map, an option could be to include the urban limit.
Correct, absolutely, that's an option. I mean, these maps are, and I know I keep saying this, but these maps really are just guidelines. The ultimate decision obviously falls to council, and council has to be satisfied with the evidence and with what's being proposed. As Councillor Smith rightly pointed out, what we're proposing is a limitation on people's rights and freedoms, such freedoms being to drink alcohol. But so long as council is satisfied, then even if we did get a challenge, the challenge would only be in terms of whether or not we were satisfied. I mean, they could potentially overturn that aspect of the bylaw. They wouldn't overturn the entire bylaw. But so long as we can point to A, why we've made that decision, B, where that decision has come from, then council should be comfortable with making those decisions. But I sort of premise that with saying that we have to ensure that the community has been made aware of that being a possibility, rather than us just saying at a later date, oh, well, we looked at it all and we decided to impose different limits rather than the ones that we went out on consultation with.
So, sorry, Madam Chair, for butting all the time, but it just, to my mind, Kirsty, this needs to make up part of this consultation document, and then assess the feedback as to whether there is support for it. And that's
Correct.
Probably the only change that I'm looking for in this, is the fact that we actually do it. And look, and I really struggle, because when I look at these maps, and I look at Raglan, and on one map we identified the CBD area, and then on the next map we're trying to do it as a ward wide. So isn't that a great big urban limit? So, you know, I want to put the cards on the table so people can actually pick which card suits their communities. And I think let the community guide us, not us tell them what they need. Let them guide us, and I'm damn sure they'll come back with some good feedback. You know, I've been through this before, and I know the feedback that'll come back.
Through you, Madam Chair, is the Mayor actually saying he wants urban limits for all the communities? Because I'd support that.
That's what I'm saying is, yes, put it in there as part of the consultation. Whether you accept it at the end or not will be up to the panel or the hearings committee. But if you don't have it in there, it's damn hard to introduce it later unless there's been strong evidence to that effect.
And that is correct. We made before that this could go, and I think Sarah Gorman was quite happy with it, that on each map we can have the, the urban limit, whatever the wording is, the urban limit of Ngaruawahia could be another option, or the urban limit of Huntly could be another option, and just so make people know that you've got the maps there, but there is an option of it being the urban limit. Councillor Gibb, so patiently waiting. Have you still got a question?
No, I'm supportive of Councillor Patterson and Mayor Allan and their comments, because my concern while listening to this was to make sure we had scope. If we decided to bring in the urban limits, we had to have scope in the original document.
And people don't sometimes think outside of what's right in front of them. So if we don't have that option there, they may not think that there's a possibility to have that option. So I'll leave it there. Whichever way the staff can bring it into the consultation document, I'd be happy. If you felt we had to individualise Ngāra Wāhia, I could support that because Councillor Patterson said there's evidence for that. But it does look then, if we did that, that we're picking Ngāra Wāhia as opposed to another town. So maybe the verbal, or not so much the verbal, but an overarching comment that it could be all towns being urban limits as an option would be a better way to go, politically correct way to go.
Thank you. Councillor Church, this is the last question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree that we should have that as an option, because my understanding of when we did the dog bylaw hearing, unless from the proposal consulted, if we didn't have feedback from someone around a particular point, we couldn't then add it in because we fully consulted it. So I think we have to be extremely careful that we actually have the options consulted now when we go out. So I think the district-wide is really important. My suggestion on that, just to help people, because they're quite visual, is that we've got existing maps, and that's where we are at, so that people are easy to find those. And also maybe just a light graded, if it is the idea of the townships, if it's showing what that looks like, because it's saying that people don't even understand their own spatial concept of their towns, just a light graded map of what that looks like, and I think would be very helpful, because then people have got a reference between what's existing and then therefore their experiences, what's quite an overall blanket covering potentially, and I think we'll get a better feedback as to actually that's too much, or that's ideal, or I want somewhere in between, or what we had was better, or what's their experiences. If we don't do it visually, I don't think that people are going to really understand what we understand as our townships and that area. But I agree that if we don't put that in now, we will find it very difficult if we find that for all of our towns to be able to retrospectively put it back in the hearings. Or we might be able to miss one town out because one town didn't exactly say those exact words in the hearing.
That's a good point. Thank you very much. I will leave that over to staff. I think the message has been very clearly communicated. We have a recommendation on page 40. I had a mover in Councillor Eyre. Are you still happy to move that? Councillor Eyre? You're still happy to move that. I had a seconder in Mayor Allan. So all in
I'd like to move an amendment. I would like to see, if we're going to do this bits and pieces stuff, that rather than leaving it up to staff, that we actually make a decision. And I would propose that all maps be changed to reflect the urban limits of the locations that we're highlighting. So rather than have one bit here and this is another alternative, it's too confusing.
And I don't actually think your amendment is necessary. I'm
looking at the what's in the agenda, Madam Chair, and I think it is.
I think we've given a clear direction to staff as to what alterations we do want to the maps. If you feel that needs an amendment and it's not sufficient for staff, then by all means.
So look, can I as a seconder, and Councillor Eyre can speak to it as a mover, but I'm going away from this on the understanding that, back to Councillor Church's point, that we actually do the grey shading for the urban limits to show that as well. Yeah. So I'm taking that as a given, and I don't think we need an amendment to do that. But I take Councillor Smith's point. I'm assuming that's what the outcome here is.
Well, but that's not what the proposal says, sir. So my concern is that let's say what we actually intend. I don't have a problem with you sorting out the wording, but the reality is what's written is what's written, and it's not what we're intending. So I'm being pedantic, I appreciate, but we got out of trouble 11 years ago with this bylaw, and we're running the same problems now.
All right, do we have a seconder for Councillor Smith's amendment? Mrs. Moana Tufanga, you're seconding that? Okay. Okay. So we now put the amendment. So your amendment, Lynette, do you want to put that up on screen, or it's that? Or I think the amendment reads, Councillor Smith, all maps are changed to refer to the relevant urban areas. Is that correct?
Urban limits, yes.
Or to include the shading for the urban limits.
Yeah, urban limits. Okay. So I will put that amendment. All in favour, please raise your hands. Golly gee, hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, now you're putting hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I think that that amendment would be carried, and that now becomes part of the recommendation.
Correct, substantive recommendation.
Happy to move that, Madam Chair.
No, well, okay, so I'll go back to Councillor Eyre as the mover and Mayor Allan as the seconder. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, look, I'm comfortable with that. I don't problem.
So all in favour, please again raise your hands. Thank you very much. That is carried. Thank you. Right, let us move on to the final item. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Jody. The final item, which is a late item, and that is the climate change policy. Now, this is an internal policy, but it is coming to this committee so that you're aware of what's going on, and I think we'll be talking to this. Yes, Jim?
Yeah, well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I think Kat might actually be introducing, but since I've started, I'll go ahead and just say that yes, it is quite significant, and that's why we're asking you to have a look at it. It is mostly internally oriented, but it also will impact on our planning for the long-term plan, and it will have implications for your decision making in the future. So it is very appropriate, I think, that that it be considered and hopefully endorsed, approved by you today. We did workshop this a few weeks ago with you and incorporated some of the, well, pretty much all the amendments you asked for as a group of elected members. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on this? As Jim says, we have workshopped it. It is an approach to how we make our decisions, and it means that we don't make short-term decisions that have some rather negative risks. Councillor Waterton.
Thank you. Just on page 6, you talk about councils. Who are we talking about? Like, you go into the definitions and it talks about elected members, and it talks about working just a council with WDC, and it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense when you read it when that's saying it's elected members, and if you put those words in instead of councils, it doesn't make sense to me.
Sorry, which reference to councils on page 6? There's just a few that I'm looking at.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm asking. Who are we referring to?
Sorry, Councillor Waterton, which point number are you referring to?
Oh, well, it says effectively policy implementation, so it's page 6 down the bottom, implementation method, and councils is sort of through it a couple of times.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. So that's Waikato District Council, and so that is us as an organization, which the definition says elected members, but we could amend that to include the organization as a whole, if that would be clear.
Is there any other discussion on this point, Councillor Eyre?
Just a comment. In light of the fact of our workload with the policy review, I do note that you've got this for 6-month review cycle, and the importance of keeping that front and forefront of priority, because we have got a change in political climate, and we've got the remit clearly, and that could have implications for this policy. So we just make sure that that is definitely occurs in 6 months, a review.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beck, Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are
Yeah, very.
I don't know why.
I'm very happy to move this at the appropriate time. I think it is very much in line with the feedback that we gave at the last workshop. And I make the point, I suppose, that what we're actually waiting for as elected members is the Climate Action Plan. So we started off with the strategy and finance, asking for an action plan. This is really an interim step, and I appreciate why staff have come back just to make sure and check in, I suppose, that they're on the right path. But I'm very conscious that what we're all waiting on is really the action plan. What are we going to do? So that's this is a good step in that direction, and this just staff effectively checking back in that they've heard us right in terms of our direction. So happy to endorse.
Thank you. Councillor Church, then Mayor Allan.
Yeah, look.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Just happy to second Dutch. I'm happy with the direction we're going. Thank you for the effort.
Okay, Mayor Allan.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to go back to Councillor Ayres' comment. My understanding is this is a policy position, but it's actually a living document. So it's not like the rest of our policies that we put in place for a 5-year period. This will change over time in relation to as circumstances change. We can feed more into it, so it's more of a living style of a document. I would say probably unique in relation to a policy, but that's probably the way I felt it would be treated.
Thank you. Councillor Thomson, did you have a comment? No. Councillor Waterton?
Yeah, going back to the implementation method, down the bottom, number 5, you're talking about provide appropriate dedicated resources. Are you understanding of what sort of cost this is going to put? Because this is going to go right through our decision making. And you've obviously mentioned there's a cost here, so that would assume it's going to be significant. And we've already had a councillor mention that she's not happy with the money, and she passed it earlier on. And so, what sort of cost is this going to bring up, please?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Well, I think the key word there is appropriate. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be exorbitant or even significant, but it does need to be appropriate. So in some cases that may mean an initial investment in something that will deliver cost savings and energy efficiency over time. In other cases, it might mean just allocating a certain proportion of existing staff time just to ensure that this is given the attention that it merits and doesn't sit on the shelf and become non-implemented. So it's just really like any action-oriented policy, ensuring that that the organization backs up its words with delivery.
Thank you. Mayor Allan, did you have a comment?
No, look, I went through this with Jim about 3 weeks ago, Jim, I think it was. And yeah, look, I'm quite happy with it. As I said, at the time, it will evolve. And look, all it is effectively, I read what Jim's just said, is when we make certain decisions around certain things, we take the climate change into one of those contributing factors going through. So as our business evolves, this document will evolve as well.
So, thank you. So we have a recommendation on page 2, which is that we approve the internal policy. And I have a mover with Councillor Beck, a seconder with Councillor Church.
So, question, Madam Chair. So, did you want to include that amendment to the definition of council so that it includes the organization as a whole, not just elected members, just for clarity, or is that
I think anything
captured in the minutes?
All right, just before I put it to the vote, Councillor Ayres.
Just one question, page 6, point 2, collaborate neighbouring territorial authorities, etc., carry out research. Could I just have a little bit more information on that? Carry out research. Is that really District Council role? What do you mean in terms of research?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a good question. We certainly don't mean our council staff doing scientific research. It's not really our role. So it's embedded in that collaborate. So it may be that we collaborate by providing some funding to assist with research that will benefit us. It may be, maybe it's policy research that we're doing at our desk about what other councils are doing. So it is research in a broad sense.
I think you'll find, Councillor, generally most things have an element of research behind them, whether it's desk research or just purely speaking to other councils. So it could fall that. Sorry, so back to where I was. A mover in Councillor Beck, a seconder in Councillor Church. All in favour, please raise your hands. And against, it's carried. Thank you very much. And that is all. And our meeting is closed. I declare the meeting closed at 11:06. Thank you very much for your attendance.
And I will see everybody at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.